background sounds, yeah. Good? Okay. Thank you, Josh, for that lovely introduction. Thank you all for showing up and being here for this conversation. I really want this to be a conversation. I'm going to share a few thoughts that I have and that I've gathered from other people in the world around the talk called Resourcing and Reflecting, Exploring the Role of Feedback in Community. So I'm really wanting to invite inquiry amongst us around how we can give and receive feedback in community. And this is inspired by a tragedy, actually, that occurred earlier this year in the Psychedelic Society of San Francisco and the psychedelic community at large. A friend of ours, who is a very prominent figure in the psychedelic community in San Francisco, suddenly overdosed on heroin in April, and it was about as bad as it could be in that he died in his parents' bathroom while visiting them for the first time in a long time, and just didn't come down to dinner type style. So it was incredibly tragic, and what it presenced to those of us in the community to was, is there something we could have maybe said or done to reach out to this person, especially those of us who knew that he had a heroin addiction. So it has prompted a lot of conversation in the psychedelic community around how we can be responsible for being in our integrity and authenticity and speaking up when that feels appropriate or seems important to us, as well as how do we allow people to have the spaciousness they need? How do we greet people when they're maybe not available for feedback, or maybe they're not going to do anything with it? How do we still hold them and love them? And particularly in the psychedelic community, and very much in PCC, this is a community where we're constantly pushing the edges and we're constantly dancing very fine lines and trying to find a way to support people in their inquiry and in their expression, and at Esalen at large as well, and also hold some container that allows for there to be safety and love. So, in part, this talk is an honor of and acknowledging and grieving that process that occurred with this friend earlier this year and how that's touched so many people. So we've come here on this journey to Esalen. Many of us feel like we've come home. As I shared with you last night, I'm very blessed to call Esalen my first home in California and to have lived here for a chunk of time, over 2007 to 2008, and to still be able to come home to Esalen on a really regular basis. Wade Davis, who was one of the original students of Richard Evans Schultes, the great ethnobotanist, said at a conference I attended earlier this year, the purpose of a journey is to discover a new vision of life. And so we've come here on this journey to Esalen, we've come here on this journey through PCC to discover a new vision of life. And I'm hoping that the inquiry we're entering into this morning can help us to come forth with a new vision of how we can communicate in community. So I'd like to share a little bit about a vision I have, which is still evolving. This vision is a community where each member commits to a process of being available for, giving, and receiving feedback, such that this giving, receiving, and availability opens new possibilities for individual and collective evolution on all levels of being and experience. So that's what I'm holding as I'm coming into this conversation with you. Some of you might have attended the Stan Groff conference this past weekend and seen Fritjof Capra speak. He said something along the lines of, great creativity comes forth from great intellectual challenges and great emotional safety. Earlier this summer, Bob Jesse, who is a psychedelic researcher and sits on the Council of Spiritual Practices and a general badass, gave a talk about this topic spawned by this friend's death, about how we can give and receive feedback. And so I want to share a few things from that conversation that I think are worth bringing up. Bob helped to lead us in a discussion around several questions, applying these both to ourselves and our community at large. What enables me to receive feedback well? What blocks me from receiving feedback? What enables my community to receive feedback well, and what blocks it? And he invited us to share an example of when a particular person's behavior concerned us, and to share whether we did or didn't do anything about that, and how we felt about that, and maybe what's happened since then. The conversation generated a lot of questions. I'm just going to read a few of those to give you an idea of the sense of what came up in this process. Some of the questions were, what to do when a community member is screaming out for help? What to do when we have an issue with a leader or a person in power, especially if they have not received previous feedback very well? How to speak with someone when they are triggered? How to receive feedback when you are triggered or potentially in a place of power? Again, how to address our intelligent, exploratory friends and hold them. How to look at our self-responsibility, our shadow work, our diversity in community. What to do when someone wants to change but does not have the capacity or the tools. How can we resource ourselves and each other? The importance of putting all issues on the table, articulating them, reflecting upon them, and how to have proper follow-up after a conversation. So some thoughts that I've had on what might be able to help this process stem from various traditions, places I've studied, living at Esalen, doing Landmark Forum. How many of you have done Landmark Education? Any portion of it? Wow. Okay. I'm actually really shocked to see that. Okay. I was introduced to Landmark my first year of medical school, and while I did experience it to be a bit cultish, I have a lot of appreciation for the cognitive constructs that they present that I think are helpful and apply to this situation. So I'm going to share a little bit about some of the things that Landmark taught me that still influence me 12 years later. I'm going to put a few things up here on the paper. So Landmark talks a bit about this kind of circle of knowing. And so in here we have things that we know. Like, I know how to suture a wound and do a pap test. And I know how to pick plants from the garden. And then there's things that we know we don't know. Like, I don't know how to fly a plane yet. And this is mostly the realm of our experience here. The things I know that I know and the things I know that I don't know. But what's operating the massive piece of the pie here is the things that we don't know that we don't even know. But this is a lot of what's running the show. And that's our unconscious projections, that's our fears, that's our deep-seated wounding, things that maybe haven't come to the surface into either of these realms, but that's a lot of what's running the show. So sitting with that conceptually, I think, is helpful. Some other things from Landmark. The concept of already, always listening. This is the lovely phenomenon that we're all guilty of, where before someone even opens their mouth, we know what they're going to say. I know exactly what you're going to say. It's going to go like this, and whatever. And what that does is it kills off possibility. It does not allow for the possibilities, the infinite possibilities that exist to emerge when we're already always listening, and we already know what this person's going to say, or how they're going to behave, or what they're going to do. And another concept around that is called running a racket on someone. So it's like, I've got my racket, I'm clubbing you to death before you even open your mouth. Some of the other things from Esalen are looking at exactly what the cost and the payoff. I'm sorry, from Landmark. I said Esalen, but it might as well be Esalen. What the cost and the payoff is of this behavior. What's the cost of killing this person off and killing off possibility, and what's the payoff? What am I getting out of that? And listening in for our integrity around that. And ultimately, the last thing I want to leave you with from Landmark is the concept of get off it. Meaning that if you want to live in the realm of possibility, sometimes you just have to get off it. Meaning you have to let go of being right or being fixed or listening and killing off the possibility. So those are a few things from Landmark that I still find helpful. In terms of some other things that I find possible ways of killing off possibility, some of our dear friends here presenced me to some things last night that are alive here in the community. One of them being when we are uncomfortable with someone or a situation, we have the tendency to maybe just completely avoid it, block it out, like, oh, it doesn't exist, I don't see the big pink elephant over there, or maybe we're a little bit obsessively kind of tracking what's happening, where's that going? And neither one of these spaces is really necessarily a good use of our energy, right? It's not in integrity. We're not alive and vital in that place. We're hurting, essentially. Two things that are very alive in the community that I grew up in Connecticut, and I would say the general kind of Northeast culture, and probably other parts of the world, is the culture of sarcasm and one-upping. And in my experience, people will one-up to death. It will get to the point where it may even escalate to violence. And so that is something that I've had to decondition myself from personally, and something I've had to call others on and say, this is not something I want to invite in conversation, is sarcasm and the one-upping, and I can do it better and I'll get the last word. All of this behavior really, again, kills off possibility. There's obviously nonviolent communication as an option. Another valuable experience I had earlier this summer was being in a group process that involved MDMA. And in the context of being in the space of MDMA within community, we were invited to work in dyads and sit with someone and explore what our projections were about each other. And that was a very powerful inquiry, to sit with that and to say to someone, wow, here's how I perceive you. Here's what I've projected around who you are and your way of being. Something that I also find very helpful that arises from my time living here at Esalen, this Gestalt model has 3 parts to it in terms of how to approach someone when wanting to give feedback or enter into a conversation. And that is to first give appreciation, to actually acknowledge the things that are working or that you love about a situation or about a person, and then to address the things that are not working for you. And then last but not least, to end it on what your hope is. My hope is for healing. My hope is that we can be friends. My hope is that we can X, Y, or Z. So I find that model very helpful. Sometimes writing things out ahead of time is very helpful, especially for discharging emotional energy around a situation so that we can work out that emotional piece before bringing that to someone. There was an exercise I was introduced to in our mind-body medicine classes in medical school that's called the 3-part letter. And so the 3-part letter involved first writing a letter to someone with whom you had an issue or charge, just like letting it all out, everything you wanted to say, and then writing a letter back to yourself that was the response that you wanted to hear from that person. And then the final letter was writing one more letter back to them, acknowledging them for speaking up and writing back to you in the first place. So what to do when we have breakdown in community? What to do when there's discomfort in the room, when a lover is no more, when a friend pisses you off. What do we do? So I've thought about a few things that might be helpful for us, and then I'd like to open it up in a few minutes to explore this a bit together. But when we have breakdown, a place I keep coming back to personally is to touch into my heart space. What's my heart really saying? So often, especially being involved in such a beautifully intellectual community, we go to this headspace, thinking, intellectualizing, cognitively functioning and detailing and sorting things out from that place, but it cuts us off. It's all happening up here, and it's not necessarily always happening from this integrated heart space. So dropping into the heart. And I had a good talk with Brian about this over lunch the other day. How can we practice, bring ourselves into maybe a meditation practice that helps us to feel, just simply feel into heart space, to quiet the mind for a little while, to feel into heart space, to notice what the body's doing. That's a lot about the Gestalt process as well that I learned here at Esalen, listening into what the body's doing. Where's the sensation? What is it calling forth? What emotion is attached to it? How can we come into the heart space, settle ourselves a bit, find some peacefulness, and then feel into what it is that we want to feel around a situation, whether that's healing with someone, whether that's the place we want to live in, the job that we want. What does it feel like to live in that place of feeling around this healing or this possibility? And then see what thoughts and details arise from that heartfelt place, not starting the other way. In the Hawaiian culture, there's this concept of ho'oponopono, which essentially means to make things right. Another translation of ho'oponopono is, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. So inviting that in to our interactions. Another friend of mine in the medicine community said this summer, after blessing us with a really beautiful sound healing ceremony, healing is finding resonance between heart, body, and mind. Another teacher in the medicine path clued us into the possibility and the details of what she calls honorable closure, addressing 4 questions. Where have I been inspired by these people, or this person, or this situation? How have I been touched deeply? What lessons has my heart learned? What challenged us in our relationship? And what of my experience, or what qualities do I want to incorporate into my life as a result of this learning? The last I'll say is that the future exists as a set of possibilities. And I ask us, what are we living into? So I'd like to open this up. I'd really like to have a conversation and get some of your thoughts and feedback around what are some of the things that make you feel safe and available to receive feedback? What things make you not feel safe? What triggers you? Maybe some of these questions that came up in the earlier community dialogue can be addressed. I just think this is a very important conversation. Again, going back to that vision of living in a community where each of us takes on the responsibility of committing to a process. I don't have this figured out. This is why I'm entering into this inquiry with you, so we can look at this and see what kind of process can we evolve together so that we can show up and live into more evolved expressions of ourselves. Tom.
Yeah, I guess I was wondering about the impact of the legality of
Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I was wondering about the impact of the legality of some of the substances that you're working with in that community, and the
the effect that can have on making people feel safe and the relationship just to the law in general. Could you maybe say something a little about that kind of issue?
Sure. So the question is about legality. So of course I don't do anything illegal ever. However, in places where things are legal, I've had the opportunity to experience some of these experiences with substances that might be considered illegal here. What I'll say is that what I've heard from people who've engaged in these practices in places where these things are not legal is that it's really about setting up a container. So there's always the importance when working with entheogenic substances, the importance of set and setting. So what is the mindset that people are bringing to the experience, and what is the actual physical setting as well as the emotional container that's being held for people to be able to open up into a process. What that requires, I believe, is a lot of trust and a lot of faith that, number one, people are going to be held in that process, and that people are going to keep their mouths shut and not disclose locations and events and details of an experience. Those seem to be some of the qualities that help to make it safe so that the space for this inquiry can even open up in the first place. Otherwise, it's careful dancing. Hope that helps to answer a little. Lydia.
I'm so happy this is the first talk. And already so much of what you said has hit me in a really powerful way. So I just want to say thank you for that. I'm wondering if you could talk about, I know something that comes up for me in addressing people is especially this year, it's been coming up a lot. I notice much more than before. Just the fear. I'll feel afraid of addressing something with someone, and it'll stop me. And then especially if it's someone who holds some power, or whether it's socially or as a professor or something like that. So that fear of being the one to bring it up, noticing it, grokking it for a long time, feeling I really want to address this, but the fear I notice more often has been stopping me, and I know part of it is fear of emotional punishment in the aftermath of whatever it is that happens, of being the Saturnian figure, how to play Saturn when you have to walk into it, and the fear that comes with that. So I'm wondering if you would address that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So the first thing that comes to me when you say that is simply acknowledging. So it's very powerful when in a space like that where maybe you want to approach someone or something, and you're having fear, or you're having doubt, or whatever's coming up for you, to simply be transparent about that and approach someone, say, are you available for a conversation? Are you available for some feedback? Whatever it is that you want to do to open that. And then you can say, I want to acknowledge that I'm really scared right now to bring this up to you. I'm sitting with a lot of fear. From living and working at Esalen, it's making things I statements is very important, claiming it, as well as acknowledging the sensations that are coming up. I noticed when I walked up to you, my stomach started turning. I'm feeling really fearful. My palms are sweating. And I'm still wanting to have this conversation with you. Could you take 3 breaths with me? So really acknowledging, I think, is a great place to start. Because chances are, everybody's a little scared. Everybody's got their fear. Everybody's got their, oh my God, I'm going to get my head cut off, or this person's going to hate me, or whatever's going on for us. Again, back to this whole thing. The don't even know what you don't even know that's running the show. So much is going on behind the scenes all the time that's killing off the possibility for us of actually stepping into truthful, honest, authentic expression that is what changes the world. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah. So I've. Can everybody hear me? So this is my first semester, and I've mentioned a couple of times, it seemed like in orientation that they put some entheogens in the water. And it seems to continue. So this first talk you mentioned a gentleman who departed this plane because of heroin. And so I went right to that because because for the last over 20 years I've been working with people who are in the grips of this thing that kills. It's ravaging the world. And in fact, that's what I've been doing for the last year and a half is a gentleman, he was 29 years old. I was working with him. He was a in-stage alcoholic at 29 years old with 4 DUIs, 5 children. He was struggling with this demon, and I so in my work I have to watch how close I get because it's very painful. And anyway, I got close to this kid and found out about a month after he left treatment that the demon grabbed him. He consumed alcohol and OxyContin, which are both legal. And there happened to be a gun in the vicinity, which is a very, very bad combination, and he put a bullet in his head in front of his children. So that's where, and you bring that up right at the beginning, and so it takes me to what I know and what I don't know that I don't know. And so when I'm talking, I think someone who is in the grips of heroin addiction and he's in the bathroom about ready to go to dinner with his parents, people don't know that he's in a place that wants to kill him when he dies. And then I go to, well, is it so bad to die? It takes me to the value. Is it better to live or is it better to die? Anyway, those are the directions that I go. And, when I talk about the demon, that is something that's real, that a person's personal power is unable to deal with that. And I feel like even when I talk about that, nobody really understands that.
So maybe I can address that a little bit because I also want to honor time. So by no means am I condoning the use of heroin. My family has suffered immensely from several of my cousins who've chosen that path. And what's come up for me around this person's death, several very difficult things to reconcile. One of them is, I fucking hate heroin. The other one is, I fucking love you and now you're dead. And so I've continued to sit in this space of frustration, love, and then at the middle is like this mix of resentment and embarrassment that someone who's a prominent member of the psychedelic community died this way. So there's a piece of me that's like embarrassed and doesn't want anybody to know, because the last thing the psychedelic community needs is for people to know that one of our prominent figures died of a heroin overdose. And at the same time, not talking about it is not the solution. Not addressing it is not the solution. So again, this is an inquiry because I don't know. This is an example of a very difficult situation in which the inquiry is going on. Is there anything that could have been done? How do we have conversations with people when we see them dancing that line where there's really genuine concern for someone's life that is going to impact a much larger community and potentially the world. So I don't know how we hold this, but that's why I'm here in this inquiry with you. I'd like to ask a little bit about just some things, because we just have another moment or two left, just so that we have some things to carry into the week. Some things that you guys feel might help you to be available for feedback and things that might block you from it. So I'm just going to put that up. Like, what makes you feel safe and available, and what might block your ability to give or receive feedback. So you can maybe just popcorn out a few thoughts on that. One-on-one?
Yeah, one-on-one communication.
One-on-one communication,
safety,
okay.
Yeah.
Jess?
What blocks me from it is coming in blaming and expecting me to say sorry for something, coming into it and kind of canceling out my subjective experience and not making room to hear back my feedback about what my end of the relationship is.
So blaming, expectations, maybe a lack of space, and maybe over here on the other side, some mutuality might be helpful for enabling feedback.
Having your heart right is kind of something that kind of going into that heart space. And really finding compassion and care for the other person on a human to human level.
Humor. And what blocks me is real seriousness. It was very, very serious.
Seriousness, or maybe heaviness too? Or
yeah, like a quality of I did something wrong. You know, I mean, like wrong in the sense
that more blaming.
Yeah,
or
and also like bad. The sense of bad, shaming. There you go. Yeah.
You like suggestions?
Yeah, of course.
Anyone else? Chad, did you want to share anything? We'll go ahead. Let's do that.
I really loved what you said about this and about to Lydia about safety and sharing. But I'm curious also, do you have any suggestions on when you approach someone and they're highly resistant or incapable really of hearing what the community at large may be seeing in them that may be detrimental to themselves or to the whole? When that blockage is reached, do you have any?
Sure. So I think one of the things that it keeps coming back to, which again, I think it's about being willing to commit to a process, because if someone's not available, they're not available. And so one way to address that, say you approach someone and say, hey, could we have a conversation? I'd like to talk about this or that. Are you available for feedback? And they're completely not. Then maybe the next thing to say is, okay, can we set a time for that? Or if someone becomes very highly triggered in a conversation, rather than continuing to club at each other, saying, okay, maybe we can take some space for now and set a definite time to continue this conversation. Maybe do that with mediation. Those are a couple thoughts. Yeah. Again, I'm coming to this from this place of heartache, having lost this friend, but also moving towards this place of infinite possibility, and with the vision that this is possible. This is a possibility for us in community to enter into this conversation and see what we can create together. Alex?
Yeah, you said that some people in the community knew that this individual was struggling with heroin, and so I'm wondering if there's something about communication within the community about it that was missing. I mean, I know that when people get together and talk about another, there's the risk of it just devolving into gossip.
Sure.
But maybe if each individual didn't feel so alone in actually, sitting with this person, if they felt that there was the community behind them, or that they were representing more than their own thoughts about, the struggle that this person was going through, it might have more conversations might have happened. And
Yeah.
so how to kind of, I'm not quite sure that I have a question, but maybe like how to bring that in a little more.
Sure. In this particular situation, I spoke with one person about it a little bit and our concerns. People that were closer to this person had a bit more involvement and had things like Suboxone on hand while traveling with this person to see their parents. But, you know, the stars did not line up for that to be an effect. So he was locked in the bathroom on his own. And the last thing I'll say is that there was an experience this summer within our own PCC community where several of us sat down and discussed some concerns we had about a community member and their use of substances. And it was completely coming from a place of love and concern and compassion. And what we came to at the end of this very heartfelt conversation of concern was the commitment we all made to each other was, let's check in a bit extra the next couple weeks with this person. And let's just be extra loving and reach out and offer to spend time and give phone calls and send some text messages. And then let's all of us check back in with each other in a week or so. And or if something comes up that's red flaggy or really scary, in the meantime, let's be on it with each other to talk about, you know, if there needed to potentially be something like an intervention or a talking to or a approach. It didn't come to that. I'm not sure exactly where the state of affairs is for that person, and I haven't checked back in with that group in a while, but it was really nice to see that come forth from a really loving place and to agree upon some process for supporting this person a bit more. Do you have something? And I know we're way over time. But
there's so much that we...
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we just think it should be a required course for, like, everyone. Like, more than half an hour, yeah.
I mean, we're like sandwiching in a lot here, but, you know, my hope is that this just starts an ongoing conversation over the week, and, you know, please feel free to approach me, approach each other. You know, these things will be here. We can keep talking about this. We can set another time. And you know, I just want to say, like, I'm available for feedback on a personal level. I'm available for feedback on a communal level. And just about this, if there's things that you're like, oh, what about this or that? And you know, it's just about approaching and asking and then respecting and, living into the possibility of a community that can really care for each other and support each other. And sometimes that involves having difficult conversations. So, yeah. Thank you guys so much.